We have Casting the Frank Stone round the corner. It comes out on September the 3rd. And Behaviour and Supermassive Games have dropped more news for us to sink our teeth into. Jack, we have received not only a video, the one titled Welcome to Cedar Hills, but you found an article from Game Informer. So we'll start off with the video, mate. There's a lot to unpack here. And also, before we do get into this, guys, there are potential spoilers involved here. So if you want to experience the game fresh without, any kind of information, this probably isn't the video for you. Maybe experience it afterwards. But for now, I would recommend missing this one because there is a lot to unpack and we have uncovered quite a few things here. Jack, I'll let you kickstart. What did you make of the video and what did you find in there?
Really interesting, actually. You know what? First of all, on just a pure visual standpoint, the graphics do look really good in this game. And actually go into this a little bit in the video as well. When they talk about the mechanics of how they've now got Unreal Engine 5, so that when they're doing the lighting, I particularly like that shot where you're looking down a tunnel and you can see how the light is behaving on the walls. So it's certainly gone up a level. I will still sort of hold reservations on the whole facial animations thing. I know that this is a common criticism that we've given Supermassive Games over the years, but there wasn't loads of shots where you could quickly see, how the facial animations were. So when we play the game, we'll ultimately have to see how they pan out. But yeah, it just gives you a backdrop of Cedar Hills, doesn't it? And actually, from this video, I've got some serious, I know we've just covered it, but we've got some serious Little Hope vibes, the fact that it's this town, it's centered around this industrial, steel mill, and the fact that in its recent history, it's then closed down, which is like the factory in Little Hope. And obviously then it sort of has ripple effects throughout the town and stuff, and there's sort of old and new buildings popping up and whatnot. So a nice little callback to Little Hope as well. But honestly, overall thoughts so far, yeah, I'm buying into this town of Cedar Hills, mate. How about yourself?
Yeah, big time, lad. I mean, to touch on the points you made, the Unreal 5 engine, yeah, it does look stunning. And I really like the element they showed where you had the bit where they took photos of real roads around them in, I guess, Guildford, since that's where they're based, right? And then they've imported that in the game. So what's cool is that apparently this game is set in Northwest America, so we could imagine Washington, Oregon, potentially around there. But we're going to have elements of Guildford, England in the game, lad. And I wonder if me and you, some fellow Brits, are going to think, yeah, that looks like a very British hedge there. But I quite like it because it's almost like there is an element of Supermassive Games, or an essence of themselves in the game. So I think that's just pretty neat from an artistic point of view. And the other thing you mentioned about how the town looks, it's funny you mentioned Little Hope. Now, I actually have it written down here, but it reminded me very much of something else, actually. So, how we're also talking about the game Lost Records, and I said it drew a lot of parallels from, It. This place screams major It 2 to me, because the main town just screams Derry to me, particularly the bit where James McAvoy goes in and buys a bike from, the guy, the cameo from Steven Spielberg himself. But also, you've got the tunnels that they walk into, and that just looks like the tunnels that the bullies hang out in. And I was just getting major Derry vibes from Cedar Hills.
You know what? I can see that. And even thinking about a lot of Stephen King's, he sets it in sort of where is it, Maine, isn't it? A lot of his books tend to set in Maine and certain parts of America. But no, I can completely see that, mate.
Yeah, that's it. Stephen King. I meant to say Stephen King, not Steven Spielberg. Editor, please don't leave that in. Here's me saying Stephen King. Edit that back in, please. But yeah, lad, the other thing that the video mentions is the theme of retreading in locations and the parallels between the 60s timeline and the 80s timeline. And I found it really fascinating when that one chap was talking about the furnace room, right? Where in the 60s it's full of energy and you've got the flames in there. And then you go back to it in the 80s and the room's absolutely dead and rusted and things have overgrown and that nature's then died. And it makes me think, and it's going to link with a lot we have to say later, but I always knew there was going to be like a little bit of a supernatural element in this game, because we saw like the old trailer where there's that like green pit that the girl's falling into that we now know is called Christine Gordon. But yeah, like I'm super intrigued to see what like the supernatural element of the game is going to be, because I kind of walked into it a little bit naively thinking that we're going to get a very grounded serial killer, but supposedly not. But then again, being the DBD fan I am, it's very supernatural, so maybe I was an absolute fool to think that we were going to be getting a grounded game when we're not.
I mean, they did allude to it as well, like in this video as well, that they hope that fans do pick up the DBD elements that they obviously have littered throughout the game, so they'll be like a nice little treat for fans like yourself. But yeah, it's a good point. It's something that I am thinking about as well, because from what we've seen at the minute, apart from a couple of little glimpses, I am very curious as to how they're going to knit this story together of presumably a serial killer in Frank Stone, you know, the ripple effect of, you know, how his killings have gone in Cedar Hills, and then you're tying something in like DBD, which obviously I don't have a lot of knowledge of. If you're thinking about the fog, you think about the entity, how on earth does that come into play? So it will certainly be interesting to see how it's worked, whether it's going to be almost like a complete pivot point shift at some point in the game, almost like in Until Dawn, where you've got the Psycho as the threat. Next thing you know, it's like suddenly the Wendigo. Like whether it sort of shifts like that, we'll have to see.
And the last thing I have to say from this video before we move on to the article that you found, Jack, is that for the eagle-eyed DVD fans, I mean, they mention it as well that they want to put enough lore and nods to the game and tribute it. And when they picked up that doll, I mean, you probably gathered this, but you wouldn't know this, Jack, but that doll of like kind of like the woman with like the little baby in her front pocket, that is one of the killers in the Dead by Daylight game. One of the ones that I was around with like right before I dipped off and stopped playing the game. They're called the Twins, and she's a killer who can kind of like go around, but then you can actually go into the vision of the little baby and then like run around and terrorize people that way. So like you almost get to play as like two killers in one who are like connected. It's pretty funny because you get to kick the baby. You get a lot of good laughs out of that. But yeah, so just nice to see another little killer. Obviously, we've had the Huntress Mask and the Wraith Staff. So yeah, just really cool to see all these DBD little nods in there.
You know what? This is wishful thinking from me, but seems as we're talking about like DBD references in this game, I don't know why this come to mind. I remember, you know, when we was talking about the Quarry, like, well, it was about 2 years ago now, and I made that wild theory about how it could be like a Cabin in the Woods ending where you've suddenly got all these different types of villains coming out. How insane would it be? And I remember that if Frank Stone went along those lines, like, imagine, because we did hear rumours a while back about like how Supermassive apparently got like the rights to Ghostface, and obviously Ghostface is a killer in DBD, and I just sort of wonder like if there's going to be like a surprise up their sleeve. Like maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, but it'd be pretty awesome if you not only got Frank Stone, but you've suddenly got these other killers that just like emerge from the fog as to like a final showdown or something like that. But yeah, I thought I'd put that out there.
Nah, very well. And you know what, speaking of multiple killers, mate, like there is a point which I will allude to later on, because we're going to go into the Game Informer article now, which you found, mate. And I'll just let you kickstart, mate. What does the article mention?
Yeah, so basically it's what they're talking about is this camera that the players are going to be equipped with. And obviously we know about the characters. They're going to the steel mill to create a film, right? Murder Mill. But actually, and it's quite surprising, like it's going to be used in quite a big way. Like not only are we going to be using it to actually film content, but the capabilities of the camera like are going to evolve as the game goes on. And while I'm on this sort of like Easter egg wave, I'm going to sort of point it out again, another tie into The Devil in Me. It's just interesting again, like you play as Mark and you've got a camera and you can film stuff, and it's like they've taken that idea and they've evolved it even further, which obviously is a good thing. It's going to be a different type of mechanic, like they're saying here, like that you can it shifts into first person ultimately, and I'll leave for you to go into this, mate, but it's going to have certain capabilities that are going to be very important in the story. And actually, as well as another little Easter egg that they were talking about, how the film Super 8, I don't know if you've seen it, mate, but that is like tying in big time with the actual plot of this game as well. Because towards the beginning, the characters, they go to the curiosity shop because their old camera is completely screwed. So they then buy this camera, and then that's where it really kicks off, and they start to learn about, you know, obviously about doing the film, but also like what sort of special things it can do as well.
Yeah, like I will admit, I've never seen Super 8. I've seen films like it where a bunch of young kids get a camera and they want to film stuff, and like, you know, I think the most notable one's probably something like Blair Witch Project, which I've seen. So like, yeah, it's cool that there is inspiration from that. It, you know, you could argue that that genre is a little oversaturated, but I think it seemed this game looks unique enough that they're going to do a unique spin on it. And then obviously, like, the maker Goss speaks about elements of how he was bored and he begged his like parents for a camera, and then this is what, you know, that experience has bled into this game where it's just about some bored teens in this dead out town, and they just want to make a project together, and then they, you know, take it too far and get in the midst of this Cedar like abandoned steel mill, and you know, like, there's good premise here for this to be like a pretty good game. But yeah, speaking about this camera, so obviously, you know, like the plot does reveal that they break it, so they go into this curiosity shop, which is the one we saw from the trailer where it has all the DVD trinkets in, and then they pick up this new camera. But what's interesting is that, yeah, like you said, you can go into first person and you can freely film at any moment if you have the camera. But this is the bit that caught my eye, lads. So I'll read out the quote exactly. It says, "The camera is also imbued with some kind of magical energy and will be useful for survival. For example, one section of the game features an invisible enemy that can only be spotted using the camera's viewfinder, which causes the camera to crackle with energy." Now, I'm not gonna lie, mate, there's two things I think of here. One thing, that is terrifying. It's almost like, you know, the vampire in the, like, not in the mirror concept, where, like, you know, but it's kind of the opposite, but there's things that you can't see with your naked eye, but you can see through the camera. And that, like, I mean, it has been done in horror before, but in my opinion, it is a very good horror tool. And I'm going to be quite nervous playing that, mate. I don't know about you, but like that is like quite a terrifying concept to me. And I'm excited to see how they execute that. But the other thing as well, mate, is that an invisible enemy that can only be spotted using the camera's viewfinder. Now, Frank Stone, although, like, yeah, I've said, like, he might be supernatural, I'm just getting the impression that he's just kind of this almost like cave person that's like living in this mill, you know? I don't get like magic, supernatural vibes from him. So I'm almost kind of asking here, and it's like what you said before with like the Psycho in Until Dawn, and then you actually have the Wendigos. Are we getting more than one villain or monster in this game, lad?
I mean, it certainly sounds like it, because you'd think otherwise that they would just outright refer to Frank Stone. But the fact that there's an invisible enemy, I mean, again, like, is this something tied into DBD? I mean, I'm assuming, obviously, you've played the game, that there isn't an invisible enemy. So maybe, again, this is something new. But what I really like about this idea is that we've said already on the channel a few times that we want to see different types of horror, different experiences from just the jump scares that we've got used to over the years. What I think this camera does is, not only is it a good thing for just the player as like a bonus thing to be able to look around and stuff, but the fact it's then putting you in a first person perspective, and then you're then looking at an enemy through like a narrow vision, because obviously when you're in a third person you can rotate the camera and look around, so like the horror might not land as well as you know, putting it in first person, because your vision's more restricted. We know that the enemy's invisible, so it has to be through the camera that you see them. So again, like, I think opening up to new horror and new ways of scaring the player, I think it could actually be really effective, and I hope it does pan out that way, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they've done with it.
Nah, of course. And yeah, like, as you can see on screen, we have this really good shot of like the camera mechanic, and the HUD looks pretty cool. And like, before we kind of wrap up, there's sort of two little bullet points I have, lad, and one is again about the HUD. But in the article, we've got this really lovely photo here of what seems to be third person gameplay of Christine in the curiosity shop. Now, I don't know if you remember, lad, but when you play the DPA games and any other Supermassive game, if there's a object to interact with, you almost have that kind of like blue-white kind of like glow when you walk near an object to kind of show that you can interact with it. Now, it looks like in this little image we have that there's this chest in the background that has a white outline around it. Now, I assume that that means you can interact with that object. Now, I don't know about you, but I quite like the art style of that. It almost gives me like almost like a reminder of like Life is Strange in a way, like without like the sketched arrows pointing to it. But I don't know, I quite like that as an art style.
It's also different. You know what I mean? Again, it sort of shows that they're open to like whether this is going to be something that is exclusive to this game, or whether they're going to bring it forward into like DPA Season 2. Obviously, time will tell. But actually, you remind him on something else which wasn't necessarily in this video or released as part of this article. But they did release that clip a while ago of them. Is it the Plunderer's Instinct, isn't it? Like where you see that like pulse radar thing to find clues as well. And that looks pretty smart. Like, again, does it mean that it's exclusive to this game or not? Again, time will tell, we'll have to see. But from what we're seeing already, before they've revealed any sort of like prologue or any sort of significant gameplay, we are seeing that there are like new features that we've not ever had in Supermassive games before. So it's encouraging that they are sort of experimenting and, you know, willing to mix up the formula a touch.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's always healthy to see those kind of like attitudes towards their games. And the last thing I want to mention, lad, is that, I mean, we kind of gathered it from other clips, but this sets it more in stone, pardon the pun. But like, we have like, you know, like the last trailer we had, it had like the 5 characters, like Jamie, but like I think it's pronounced like Haim, maybe, Christine, Linda, Robert, and Bonnie. Now, like, it looks very much like we're going to be following 4 teens. 4 teens are going in to make this movie. But then you've got this Bonnie, who I assume is Haimie's like sister, who's not in the mill. But then there's clips of her outside the mill speaking to Linda at one point. So, like, it begs the question, where does Bonnie fall into this game? And I'm wondering if maybe she's not in the game, but then, like, they call her for help and she has to, like, bail them out. Almost like the driver who's got to kind of, like, help them and rescue them. Maybe she, like, keeps watch on the outside. Maybe, like, she goes missing and then we have to find her again. So, like, the more we get footage of the game, the more I'm trying to piece it together before we actually play it. And I'm really intrigued to kind of like learn about this, about how the characters are going to get split up and why Bonnie isn't in the main 4.
And it would also suggest that, yeah, that if she's not a playable character, then is obviously her fate tied. I mean, I saw this interesting take where basically someone was saying, oh, you know, if you're talking about them creating the film Murder Mill, and that's what we're seeing, maybe there's a character that does have plot armor. They have to survive in order for the Murder Mill film to then be known to like the public in the present day. Maybe Bonnie's that character, you know. Maybe Bonnie is someone that has to survive to therefore whatever is left, whatever is the film composes of, she then sort of takes that through into the modern day. Because there is actually a shot, I think this was like from a previous trailer, where like it looks like it could be Bonnie if she was older. She has like white sort of spiky hair, and it sort of looks like Bonnie. If you look at like her younger self, you could imagine her growing up to sort of look like that. So yeah, maybe there's something along those lines. I'm not really sure, mate.
Well, that's it, because like you have the characters from the Murder Mill cast, like the 5 teens, but then you have these other 2 girls that, are they from the 60s? Are they from another timeline? Is the trailer's trying to throw us off? We don't really know what their role or purpose. We don't really have names for them yet, so it'll be interesting to see how they tie into the game as well. But guys, this is us just kind of really hashing out over, you know, what this new trailer and this new article have really thrown at us. Tell us what you think of our theories, and also feel free to chip in with your ones as well. We've got Frank Stone around the corner. We're going to be doing a few more videos. We have a poll coming out about this game soon, so be sure to keep tuned. And also, but Jack's going to play it over on Twitch, so be sure to head over to that as well when the time comes. Well, thank you very much for joining, guys. We will see you in the next one.
Just casually died at the end there.